Okay, I was a little bit delayed on this since I've been so busy with a whole bunch of other things, but we are now halfway through the 2018 UFL season, so here is the second half report. As we take a look at the standings in the division throughout the league, we start with the Eastern Midwest, where the Minnesota Tundra still has the #1 seed by over a 3.5 game lead over St. Louis Rockets, who are at 4-4. Indiana Brewers are third at 3-5, and Detroit's last at 1-7. Minnesota playing very good for so much for suffering a championship hangover. St. Louis has struggled so far this year, but they got right back into the mix at around 500. Indiana, after starting off 0-4, they've gone 3-1 since with a very strong defense. They're right there in the mix still, possibly for a playoff chase. And Detroit, of course, are terrible. No one's surprised. Then we go to the Eastern Gulf, with Miami leading at 7-1 with their 3-game lead over the Tampa Bay Cyclones. Then right behind them is the Memphis Warhawks at 4-4, and then lastly the Houston Bullets at 2-6. Miami still going strong, leading the division and almost having the #1 seed, which Minnesota still has right now. Tampa Bay right behind them. They're still struggling this year, completely falling off from where they were last year, but still hanging in the playoff race. Memphis right behind them, actually even playing better than Tampa Bay, and Houston falling apart still. Then the Eastern Atlantic, where the Baltimore Bashers lead at 7-1, with the Buffalo Terriers right behind them by 2 games at 5-3. The Washington Colts now are 2-6, and the Pittsburgh Titans are 1-7. The Baltimore Bashers dominate the division. Buffalo struggled a bit, but starting to turn around. Washington, their offense is finally getting a whole bunch of points, but their defense is still terrible, and Pittsburgh's awful. Then it's the Eastern Pacific, with the Utah Eagles, the worst team in the division last year, leading the division right now with their 1-game lead over the Seattle Cougars and the Oakland Magic, who are both 4-4, and the Anaheim Rockies right behind them at 2-5-1. Nice start for Utah. They've fallen off a little bit last time we checked, but they're still leading the division. Seattle's struggling. Oakland's still struggling, but they're still right there in the mix. And Anaheim is still really all over the place. So much for having one of the best overalls in the league. That's in the Eastern Conference. We go over to the Western Conference now, the Western Midwest, where the Green Bay Comets are leading at 5-3 with a tiebreaker over the Kansas Engineers at 5-3. Cincinnati's right behind them at 4-4, and the Canton Greats dead last at 1-7. It's a three-way race just like it was last year between Green Bay, Kansas, and Cincinnati. Surprisingly, still hanging in there with Cincinnati. I mean, Kansas probably being the better team with the best defense, as Canton has one of the worst offenses in the league. And then we go to the Western Gulf, where the Jackson Boxers lead the conference at 7-1, with the Columbia Marines right behind them at 5-3. The Atlanta Sun, surprisingly, right behind them at 5-3, and the New Orleans Sharks at 1-6-1. Jackson somehow with the #1 seed in the conference, despite not really playing that well offensively. Their defense is doing a solid job. Columbia Marines are hanging in right there. Atlanta with one of the best, if not the best defense in the league. Yes, they do have the #1 defense in the league. Wow, what an unbelievable turnaround that was in New Orleans. Oh boy, after winning their first game and tying Minnesota, they've lost 6 in a row and just nothing is going right for them. Then we go on to the Western Atlantic, with the Philadelphia Pythons leading the division at 5-3, with the New York Kings right behind them at 5-3. Boston's right behind them at 4-4, and Montreal's right behind in last place still at 2-6. Philadelphia struggled a lot last time we saw them, but they still have a very potent offense, and they're still leading the division, with New York right behind them, not that far off, although Philadelphia has a tiebreaker. Boston, they have a bad defense, but their offense is getting clicking, so they're still right there in the playoff mix. With Montreal, although they so far matched their win total from last year and are playing a lot better, they're still very terrible. Then we finish off with the Western Pacific, with the Los Angeles Stars leading it at 7-1, with the 2-game lead over the Lubbock Pilots, who are 5-3. Then the Denver Talons are 2-6. In last place is the Phoenix Dust Devils at 0-7-1, the only team remaining to not win a game. Los Angeles, the best team in the league so far by a mile, and they are just destroying the competition, as Lubbock is struggling to be right behind them still at 5-3. Denver, with one of the worst offense in the league, can't get anything going for crying out loud. Their defense is struggling to keep up with their terrible offense, and Phoenix is just terrible. What else to say? So now we take a look at the playoff standings right now in the Eastern Conference, the Minnesota Tundra lead the division at conference at 7-0-1. They have the number 1 seed, and they have the number 1 record throughout the playoffs too. So if they made it to the title game, they would host it. With Miami like right behind them at 7-0-1, they would have the 2nd seed in the playoff bracket if Minnesota lost. So they would host the title game after that. Then the Baltimore Bashers 7-1 at the 3rd seed, and then the Utah Eagles 4th place at 5-3. Then the Buffalo Terriers 5th seed at 5-3, and the Tampa Bay Cyclones, the best team last year in the playoffs at 15-1, right there, right back in the mix with the 6th seed at 4-3-1. Then we go over to the Western Conference with the Jackson Boxers having a tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Stars as they have the number 1 seed with Los Angeles number 2. Philadelphia Pythons, the defending champs, with the 3 seed. Green Bay Comets with the 4th seed at 5-3. Then the 5th seed is the Lubbock Pilots at 5-3, and the 6th seed is the Columbia Marines at 5-3. So it would be in the Eastern Conference, Buffalo visiting Utah, and Tampa Bay visiting Baltimore. And then in the Western Conference, it would be the Columbia Marines visiting the Philadelphia Pythons, and the Lubbock Pilots visiting the Green Bay Comets. And this time around, in the playoffs for the Eastern Conference, I actually don't fully trust Utah going up against Buffalo. They've been struggling these last bunch of weeks. Buffalo's still playing all pretty good, so I think Buffalo would get that. Baltimore would easily beat Tampa Bay, which sets them up at Miami, which I think Miami would be able to pull it off. And Buffalo goes to Minnesota, so I think Minnesota will pull that off. So then it would be Miami at Minnesota. I actually think Miami might be able to pull it off because their offense is better, and their defense isn't that far off in terms of Minnesota's power. So Miami would make their first title game appearance, and they would host the title game too by default. And in the Western Conference, it would be the Columbia Marines visiting the Philadelphia Pythons. Their rematch from the division round last year, I think Philadelphia would get that. As the Lubbock Pilots visit the Green Bay Comets, I don't really fully trust Green Bay, so I think Lubbock would get it. Philadelphia visiting Los Angeles, I think Los Angeles would get that easily, which would knock off Philadelphia as the title champion. And Lubbock Pilots visit the Jackson Boxers, I think the Boxers would get that. So then it would be the the Los Angeles Stars at the Jackson Boxers. Don't fully trust Jackson. Somehow they're 7-1 still amazing to me, so I think Los Angeles would get that. So the 2018 UFL title game would be the Los Angeles Stars at the Miami Zombies. And although I think Los Angeles is the better team so far, I think Miami would get it right now just because they hosted the game. So that would be very interesting. Right now I see Miami beating Los Angeles in the title game. I can't remember what I had last time I did the 4-week prediction. Halftime report. So, halfway down for the season, one more half to go, as we're getting close to finding out who's going to be eliminated from the playoffs, who will be getting in, and getting ready for the 2nd season of the UFL. So, see you hopefully soon for Week 9 of the 2018 UFL season.